South Carolina held their annual Garden Black spring game on Saturday night, and look, it went the way I think a lot of us expected it to go, especially from an offensive standpoint. Offensive coordinator Dal Loggins earlier in the week, he said they were going to keep the offense very vanilla, and that's exactly what we got on Saturday night. So don't overreact in terms of, okay, this is what we saw from a running standpoint. This is what we saw from a passing standpoint. That is going to be the offense come fall. That's not going to be the case. It's not going to be the case. I can tell you that right now. It's going to look totally different. So keep that in mind, number one. Number two, and I get at this time of the year, especially right after that spring game, from now until, I don't know, at least the next month or so, people are going to start overreacting on how people perform, whether it be the guys that did well or some guys that didn't do so well. I say that because, again, keep in mind, never mind the fact that the offense wasn't running an offense that we will see this fall. Never mind that they were doing things in scrimmages, and they also had 14 practices, 2 scrimmages in there. They were doing more of the things that they're going to be doing this fall then. But the players were also, it was a mixed bag on the Garnet team and the Black team. So I say that because you have some players on the offensive line working with one team, guys that they're not necessarily going to be next to. I mean, obviously injuries happen, and they could be lined up with them eventually. But look, we didn't see what the South Carolina squad we will see in the fall. So you have guys going up against 3s, 4s, and they're doing well. Maybe some guys didn't do that great. It's not to say that you can't take anything out of tonight. I'm not saying that. Certainly there were some good things that we saw. One thing that really stood out to me was the way that DeCarrion Joyner did at running back. He proved that he's capable of playing running back in the SEC. Again, it's going up against your own team. I get that. But he looked like a natural running back out there. The way he was hitting the hole, the way that he was able to even get a couple additional yards after making contact, I think he's going to be something special to see in that running back room this year. Interested to see Mario Anderson, how he continues to grow. We already know what Juju's capable of doing. So I really wasn't paying too much attention to him in terms of, okay, show me something, Juju. We know what Juju's capable of doing. One player that a lot of people I know will talk about is Lenora Sellers. There's been so much talk about how hard he can throw the football. That was evident tonight. 3 of 8, 66 yards, a lot of pressure on him at times. I mean, there was one incompletion. I think that's a play that people are going to be talking about for a while, especially over the next couple of weeks. Picks up a loose ball with one hand, scrambles, throws it to the sidelines, caught one hand. It was out of bounds, but just he shows you that athleticism that he brings. He ended with 32 yards rushing. And some of those plays were broken plays, just making things happen. But he also demonstrated how hard he can friggin' throw that football. I mean, he's got a rifle. There's no question about it. So how does he continue to grow? How does he continue to improve when it comes to reading defenses? That's the big thing from him. He has the skill to play at this level. No question. He demonstrated that tonight. Luke Doty, I was excited to see what he was going to do tonight. I think there were, and Beamer mentioned it after the game. There's probably, he was 7 of 14, but there were times where guys needed to catch those balls, and they weren't catching them. It's tough from a field standpoint. I was watching the game from the field. I'm going to go back. I'll watch the tape, see it from up top, but don't write off Luke. Don't write off Luke. This is a guy that has been in the system for a while in terms of understanding what he needs to do. He knows what his role is, and South Carolina needs to have a number 2 quarterback that they can trust. And that's not saying Lenoris can't be that guy. That's not saying that someone else in that room can't be that guy. But still, even after tonight, I'm still rolling with Doty as the number 2 quarterback. I think you're crazy if you write him off right now. Absolutely crazy. We saw this a couple years ago. This is the example I always use. Jason Brown. It's not to say Jason Brown wasn't capable of playing in the SEC. We saw what he was able to do against Florida. But what happened? Has a great game. Next week, he had to change things up a little bit because teams realized, okay, he likes to spin out of the pocket, and they exploited that. So I say that because there's certain things with the spring game that people will watch, and they're going to say, man, this kid's special. I'm not saying this specifically about Lenore's. I'm talking about just players in general. And they're going to get so caught up with it. Be excited. That's what you want. You want to see your players go out there, especially these young players that have either arrived a couple months back in January, or maybe they're heading into their sophomore year and want to see them get a little bit more spin. Be excited about it, but just slow down. Slow down. Slow down. A couple other things that stood out to me. Rattler, 12 of 20, 120 yards, touchdown. I know that interception happened that didn't happen because they blew the whistle before he threw it. But again, it's tough to get a real read because this offense, it was vanilla tonight. It was vanilla. So again, that interception didn't happen because the whistle was blown. So protected the football tonight, made some things happen, and he took advantage of hooking up with Juice Wells. I mean, Juice, 2 catches, 89 yards, a touchdown, that long of 55. That was incredible. And Gamecock fans were excited to find out that not just Rattler, but Juice was coming back because this is exactly what they hoped for. And as Juice said after the game, that's the first time he's ever scored a receiving touchdown in Williams-Brice. It was a special feeling, he said. And he put fans on notice saying, get ready to experience that and more of it this fall. One thing that Shane Beamer said after the game, though, that really stood out to me, and I know we're paying a lot of attention to the offensive guys. I'll mention some defensive players in a minute. But one thing he mentioned after the game, because I asked him this question a year ago about how much stock you actually put into the spring game, right? How much can you actually learn about your players in this game in comparison to the other 14 practices? The practices that we as media, we're not able to see the nuts and bolts of certain things with practice. We're able to see 5 periods, 6 periods sometimes for a handful of practices. We really don't get to see them do good on good. We don't really get to see guys, even the twos, going out there competing 11 on 11. We don't have that opportunity. We don't have the opportunity to go to some of these spring games. Excuse me, these scrimmages, the 2 scrimmages that they had. So you don't really know how guys are performing other than we go to those press conferences. Coaches will kind of relay some messages. Players will talk a little bit. You might hear tidbits from talking to people close with the team. And you start to say, okay, yeah. But until you actually see it. We saw that with Lenore's. We heard so much about how hard he could throw that football. We saw it tonight. How athletic he is. Things that he was able to make happen. But going back to that point with Beamer, one thing that he was looking forward to tonight was how were the younger guys going to perform? And being able to play in front of 51,000. I mean, look, let's call it for what it is. Was that the most exciting spring game? Probably not. Not by a long shot. And I thought it was awesome the way it ended with overtime. And Beamer shared afterwards they had to figure that out on the run, on the fly at the end of the game because they didn't have a plan in place at that point. But the atmosphere was absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And because of that, you were able to help Beamer and this coaching staff out a little bit tonight. Because, again, Beamer mentioned those 14 practices, how important they are. They don't just go out the window. You can evaluate that probably more, especially those 2 scrimmages, more than a spring game. But how would certain guys perform when the spotlight was on them? And again, playing in front of 51,000, is that the exact same as what it will be in the fall at Williams-Brice? No. But that's a pretty good sample size that you gave this coaching staff to be able to identify certain players and say, all right, yeah, they can perform when the lights turn on. So turning our attention to the defense, again, mixed bag. You have guys that come fall will be not necessarily next to certain players unless injuries happen. And you pray to God that never happens. But overall, I thought the defense, they did some good things tonight. We know that going into this year, Clayton White has mentioned it. We've heard from some of the players. I mean, Clayton mentioned this just the other day when coordinators had a chance to speak with the media, how they have put such an emphasis on improving stopping the run, forcing more tackles for loss, getting more sacks, making plays either at the line of scrimmage or behind it. So I say that because I thought tonight the defensive line in particular, I thought guys like even, Elijah Davis, I thought they did some good things. TJ Sanders, Demetrius Watson, we saw the defensive line get mixed up a little bit, especially at that edge position. We knew that going in. They're thin right there. There's injuries on the defensive line, especially at edge. But that's something that stood out to me, and I thought how USC did with the run game. I thought they did really well. And again, it's a spring game. You get a mixed bag. Just looking at the stats right now, rushing 27 for the black team from a net, 65 for Garnet. So rushing really wasn't there. And not that I'm trying to take anything away from the defensive line because, again, I'm giving them credit right now. We also have to keep in mind, as I mentioned at the start with the offensive line, you don't have your 5 starters out there, right? Kind of mixing it up a little bit. But again, defensive line, that is something, and obviously it goes back to that second level with the linebackers as well. But just being able to improve on stopping the run is something that we've heard a lot this offseason. It's something that certainly needs to improve after what we saw a year ago. And White and several of those defensive players have mentioned that throughout the spring. But yeah, that's what I'd say about that. DQ Smith, I know Trey Knox made a phenomenal catch. He hung on to that, and Knox, man, after the game, just expressing how amazing it was to be in that stadium, hearing Sandstorm for the first time at Williams-Brice, the LED lights, which I'm paraphrasing, but he said that he wishes he could inject that into his veins because that's how incredible it was to him. But look, I think what South Carolina showed tonight, Marion Brown was another one. Marion, I think he's going to be a guy that is going to find ways to make things happen because he's too damn quick, number one. But when he's out in space, he can be dangerous. He can be dangerous. He's quick. He's shifty. We saw some screens tonight, which, I mean, every offense is going to have screens in it. Overall, the stock blocking, not fantastic. There were some good blocks out there. I mean, talking about Knox, I think it was one of the first plays of the game. May have been the third play. It was a screen right. He missed the block. He had some good blocks, though, after that. But, again, things that you would expect at this time of the year, spring game, defense, typically they're ahead of the offense at this time of the year. But it was good to at least see the offense start to move the ball a little bit. And again, I think just seeing the way Rattler connected with Juice Wells only 2 times, but point being is you see that chemistry, even in those just 2 receptions, it's got better. It's improved. And seeing the way that Knox performed as well, it should really excite you. I mean, they took advantage of using the tight ends tonight. And when you have that many of them, and obviously you got some more talent coming this fall, why not? Why not use it? So that's kind of the overall thoughts I have on Saturday's spring game. We'll continue to roll out some interviews that we had with former Gamecock football players. Also had Bree Beal, who recently was drafted in the WNBA. And we also talked to some of the players who'll be going through the draft process as we get closer and closer. It's 2 weeks away now till the NFL draft. For the latest on all your Gamecock news, keep it locked into GamecockCentral.com. Until next time, I'm Mike Yuba.